All right, let's try this again. Because for some stupid reason, this damn laptop and YouTube keeps deciding to not use the webcam as the mic, but use the headset here as the mic. But yet, this headset I never use for YouTube, period. I only use this for when I go live on other channels. Just so dumb because it's an actual headset, you know, it's got a proper mic in it and everything, right? But for some reason, it always does this as a default rather than what's on the computer, even though this is off. When this is off, it should not choose that as the mic. But anyways, so sorry about the technical difficulties there. Um, so yes, I do want to talk about actually something that's really cool about so the Canadian only vehicles that existed, and there was quite a few to be honest. Um, and I'm not even sure how far back they go. I know, like, for models that you like, if you're an American, you'd recognize, but they're not actually um American models. They're Canadian models. Because, like, as an example, take, and I just want to make sure. Okay, I need to flip it that way. So, take for example, and I did a quick little video of this earlier today. It's on the channel, and I'll do a full deep dive of this thing. There's going to be like a little bit of a build of this. Not much of one. It's just mainly trying to get it back running. There we go. You can kind of see it. There we go. So this is a 1948 Fargo F1-C. Now, you might see that and go, well, that's a Dodge. But no, God, I keep doing that. But actually, no, these are, it is a Dodge, kind of. So it is a rebadged Dodge pickup truck for the Canadian market. And the reason that these brands actually existed was because of, oddly enough, we had a similar tax that the states had in regards to like the chicken tax. That's essentially the same thing that we had, except for it was on anything that wasn't Canadian. Um, the Americans did the same thing as us, and I think the we finally got rid of that in the 70s, and that's why those brands no longer exist. Because, like, Fargo as an example, Fargo was a brand from 19, I think it was 37 or maybe 27 until 1972. And in the beginning of the brand, they were actually quite a bit different from the Dodge pickups. You know, they had different body panels and different badging and stuff like that. But later on, they became essentially the same vehicle. Like, you saw that 48. That is the same as a 1948 Dodge B1C. Um, and it's just kind of interesting, to be honest. You know that we had these, and again, it's because of they wanted to try and protect the Canadian sort of car industry. Not that we had much of one, and there's actually Donut Media did a good video on what actually happened with the Canadian car industry and why it's not really as much of a thing anymore, excluding like some vehicles that are made here for mass markets. Like, for example, all of the LX platform vehicles, which is your Dodge Challenger, your Charger, the Dodge Magnum, and the Chrysler 300, they're all built here in Canada. Um, and the Caravan was built here as well. I don't know if the Pacifica is anymore, but regardless, you know, that's one of those things that there were just lots of things that were put in place to actually kill the Canadian car market as a whole, and we just essentially have just slightly different variants of what are in the states now. Same cars, but, like, you know, they're just in kilometers and very very minor things that are different. And that was just like some of these vehicles. But interestingly enough, like that Fargo, The only thing that's different between that Fargo and a Dodge is the fact that it says Fargo on the front of it. The tailgate would also be, depending on what year, it would actually be embossed with Fargo instead of Dodge. The badges on the sides of the hood was actually, it said Fargo, and then it would have half of the a globe on each side where it said Fargo. It's a pretty cool little symbol, to be honest. And I actually showed that in my short little video that I did. And actually, I need to take off my hoodie. Oh, I am very hot. Oh, whew. There we go. Oh, there we go. That's better. So, yeah, and that thing will be a fun little thing to build out, and just it's not even going to be a build. It's just going to be a vehicle that I work on, that I get hopefully running, and then we'll go from there. It's not mine, it's Greg's, and he is going to keep it. He's not going to sell that one, and that's totally fine. I honestly like that truck, and I would love to see it stay on the property, and who knows, maybe I might be able to convince him in the future that it should be mine. But yeah, because he traded a couple of vehicles for it, actually, that he had. But anyways, getting back to this whole Canadian-only car models. So there are quite a few. Because that Fargo was one of them, and then the half-ton version of that would have been the F1B instead of the F1C. The difference is, well, obviously, suspension, frame's a little stiffer. The engine itself, instead of being a 90, I think it was 92 horsepower flathead 6, was bumped up to 108 horsepower. And it's only a 218 cubic inch flathead 6. Now, they don't have a lot of compression. It probably only has maybe 6-to-1 compression, to be honest, so not very hard to get running. And I think the motor might be locked up, but it should be able to be unseized relatively easy because, again, there's such low compression, and it's not a big engine either. Flathead engines are very unique due to the fact that they're not overhead valve. The valves are actually inset into the block, while the head itself is a couple inches thick, like it's about that thick, and it just bolts on top, and it's basically, just to contain the compression. That's what it was for. Other than that, it doesn't like house the valves or anything like that, and there's no rocker arms or anything like that. There's just push rods, and they are a very interesting design, and it was done for a number of years. Dodge actually used the flathead design right up until I think it was in 1959 or 1958. Whenever the Slant 6 came out, to be honest. So, and they essentially used the flathead design from inception of the brand. So, and they didn't have their first V8 until the 50s with the Hemi. I think it was a 52 or 53 when they introduced the Hemi to the brand. But so looking at the whatchamacallit, the Canadian cars, because there are, like I said, quite a few that are Canadian only models, and you have one of them actually. It's kind of a unique vehicle because you just don't see very many of them. Is the Vauxhall? Well, okay, it's not a Vauxhall actually. Well, it is a Vauxhall just rebadged. It's called the Envoy Epic, and Envoy as a brand actually existed through the 60s. I'm not sure the exact inception, and they went till about 1971, 1970, somewhere in there. It didn't last very long. And basically, they just rebadged Vauxhalls, and they sold them as Canadian vehicles. And that's similar to a lot of these other ones, albeit some of these other ones are unique to the, especially the Canadian-only Pontiacs, as an example. Those are quite unique in the fact that, so a lot of them are Chevys, but they have Pontiac trappings on them. However, they are actually Chevrolet powered, every single one of them. It's kind of interesting. You can go all the way back to the earliest one that I know of the Canadian only Pontiacs that are different than the American ones. Actually, Roy Marco happens to own one of these. It is a oh, what's it called? It's a Pontiac Pathfinder. It happens to be in 1956. Now, the unique thing about the Pontiac Pathfinder is that okay, yeah, it's a Pontiac, and you can look at it and go, "That's a Pontiac." It's got the Pontiac grill in it. It's got the Pontiac sort of fins and the tail lights and all that stuff. That's Pontiac. But it has a 283 in it currently, but it actually had a 261 Chevrolet inline six, not a Pontiac power plant. So, and that was a little interesting for any of the Canadian model Pontiacs. They all had Chevrolet engines. So that's the first one that I can think of. The next one would be the Pontiac Acadian, as well as the Pontiac Beaumont. The Acadian came out first, which the Acadian was based off of, at least the first and second generation was based off, or even third generation, technically, I think. Yeah, I think so. So, anyways, that was based off the Nova, and that's just one of those things. It's kind of cool when you see them because they've got a Pontiac nose on them, Pontiac taillights, but it's a Nova throughout. It's pretty interesting to see them, and you do see them every now and then, but they are very, very rare, and the performance ones are even rarer, quite a bit more than, like a Pontiac Beaumont SD. That's the badass one from like 68 to 1970. Those will actually command a ton of money, like quite a lot of money. It's actually rather surprising of what they can bring, but mind you, they are so rare. They made almost none of these, and the SD, just like it was in for the Pontiacs through the 70s with the Super Duty, it's the same thing, but Chevrolet engines. So very cool. And they had Chevrolet frames as well, because some of the Pontiacs actually had different frames underneath them and stuff like that. So it is quite interesting. And then we had like the Parisienne, which I believe the Parisienne went the longest because we had the Parisienne into the 80s, which the Parisienne was, well, later on it became the Caprice, but earlier it was actually a Pontiac, but just with a Chevrolet drivetrain. Um it was based on, I think, the Catalina, I want to say, or something similar to the Catalina, anyways. And and you look at them and it's like, oh yeah, that looks like a Pontiac, and it's Pontiac, body on it and everything. It's not a Chevrolet, but it has Chevrolet drivetrains. They had 283s, 327s. I don't know if you could ever get a 427 in them. But it's one of those things, and they're kind of cool to see them. I see them every now and then, but they're pretty neat. There was quite a few. Actually, GM did a lot, but even Ford was in on that too. Ford had the Mercury pickups, which went from, I think it was like, again, it was about 37 or 38 right up until 1970, I want to say. And again, those were just rebadged Ford pickup trucks. That's all they were. They were not any more luxurious than the Ford pickups were, but we didn't actually have Ford trucks in Canada prior to that, just like the Dodges. We didn't have Dodge pickups prior to that either. Prior to 1972. After that, we actually got the Dodge pickups because any of them you saw were American ones. They were brought from the States. So prior to that, which is kind of interesting. And it was just one of these things, and it was nicknamed, and the reason for these is, again, what they called at least in the States, it was called the chicken tax. And the chicken tax was to, at least in the United States, was to protect the American car brands from these Japanese cars that came in, aka the chicken tax. And that was honestly just one of those deals that really, um, like if they never brought that in, to be honest, there may have been some American car brands that would have died because the Japanese vehicles were so much better and they were outselling the American cars by a lot through the 70s and even through the 80s. You know, like the best selling car since I think like 1985 or something like that, 1986? No, a little later than that. Like 1988, I think it was, is the Toyota Camry. You know, that's the best selling vehicle. Now, it's not, well, best selling car. It's not the best selling vehicle because that's the Ford F Series. But I don't like the distinction of, oh, Ford F Series, best selling vehicle of all time. Well, yeah, when you have the same vehicle since 1948, yeah, you are going to have the best selling vehicle of all time. That's just a given, right? And there are some years that the Ford actually gets outsold by GM, but because of GM being stupid, they don't actually want to um say that, oh yeah, the GMC Sierra and the Chevrolet Silverado are the same truck, because they are. They are the same truck. There's almost no differences between them. Some engine options are a little different now with like the Denali and stuff like that, but as the base truck is the same. So it's, but GM doesn't want to talk about that. It's kind of interesting, even though that if they did, they could actually say, "Hey, we outsold Ford," because there are some years that they do actually between the two brands. But um, regardless, it's just, yeah, it's just one of those things. And I don't know how I got onto this topic when I was talking about the Canadian car market, because even like the Pontiac Acadian was actually the one that went the longest. So the Pontiac Acadian died when the Chevette died, because we had our own version of the Chevette, which was the Pontiac Acadian. But interestingly enough, there are still GMs after that. Because I think it was like 1986 or something like that, 85. I don't know when the Chevette actually stopped production, but at the same time it stopped production, so did the Acadian. And again, Acadian is just a rebadged Chevette at that point. But we actually did have one more from GM after that that I can think of. And if you've ever heard of, well, I mean, you should, because it is, I believe it's the vehicle with the most variation, or the best badge engineering of all time, which happens to be the the Suzuki Samurai, right? Because, and that's technically not a GM vehicle, right? Just GM had a contract with Suzuki, and they made a bunch of versions of that. Okay, 86. I couldn't remember the exact year, but there you go. So 86 was the last year of the Chevette. That was also the last year of the Pontiac Acadian. Um, but it's interesting because of the Suzuki Samurai, Canada actually got its own version of that, which, you know, because there was the Geo, the Chevrolet Tracker. Um, there was two different Suzukis. There was a Samurai, and there was another one. But there was like, I think, 9 total, right? I believe. And one that was a Canadian only. Actually, 2 of them Canadian only. Because we had the Asuna Sunrunner, which again, Canada only, and we also had a GMC version of it. And if you're wondering, Asuna, what the hell is that? It was an off-brand of Geo, to be honest, which was again a GM brand. So, and it didn't last very long, to be honest. Just like Geo didn't last very long, nor did Asuna. And you know, just seeing, and there was a couple of Asunas that were again just rebadged Geos. It's just a little interesting of how that happens and why, you know, because after the tax was, I believe, was abolished in like 1970. Um, Possibly. I mean, the one thing is, actually, I want to say that the Suzuki was like the Samurai was probably actually a proper Suzuki because it had a Suzuki engine in it, and I wouldn't be shocked if that was actually designed by Suzuki, and then GM just partnered with them to make a bunch of variations of it. and it's just a little interesting because Subaru, that's a bit of a weird one because Subaru didn't really have as much internal design studios as everybody else did because they were a very, very small car brand until they brought out the Impreza. Once they brought out the Impreza, then they became a much bigger sort of brand. That was their kind of stepping stone, and then they brought out the Forester, which was even more of a stepping stone. You know, and that's the one thing with Subaru that way. Um, and they didn't have and their success with Rally with the Impreza really helped their sales and stuff like that too. So yeah, and oh yeah, like I like those little samurais and trackers and stuff like that. They're a fun little vehicle. They're not very fast. They're a good off roader though because they're small and they have a very narrow, like not a very long wheelbase. They sit a little high, so they do tip over, but. So George, technically, the WRX is not a model of the Impreza. It's a trim model. The WRX is the performance variant of the Impreza, but it's still an Impreza. Like it goes Subaru, Impreza, WRX, and then there's even one higher than that, which is the STI. So it's one of those things with Subaru that way. And well, just like, and fun fact, and most people don't realize this. So with going back to things that we think are one way, but they weren't always that way. So if you go back to the inception of the SS name on Chevrolets, which stood for Super Sport, right? You go back to the inception, which I believe was 1960, I think. Pretty sure. In 1960, the SS badge didn't actually mean Super Sport. It was just a trim model, which was just a couple extra luxuries on it. It wasn't until the mid 60s where the SS badge meant performance. It's kind of interesting that way, to be honest, that most people don't realize that. Or just like, the reason why, like, the pony car is called a pony car, it's because of the Mustang and its success, and that created the brand. But interestingly, though, because Plymouth came out with the Barracuda first, albeit the Barracuda was not as good looking as the Mustang. It did not perform quite as good as the Mustang. And, it didn't have the sales of the Mustang, where the Barracuda, for quite a number of years, like it didn't sell near as well. That's the reason why that, that the Mustang is considered the first pony car. It's because of those reasons. Even though technically, if you want to get real technical, the first pony car should have been the Barracuda in 1964 because it beat out the sorry, my brain's just not working as well as I'd like it to. It beat out the Mustang to production by, what was it, 2 months, I think it was? So they really just hastily put this together, and it was essentially just a up-trimmed Valiant, more than anything. It didn't become a really badass car until about 1967. So yeah, I mean, depending on year of Barracuda, like I would take a Barracuda over a Mustang if it's like a 68 or a 69 or even a 70 or 70 up to 74, right? Those are the Barracudas that I would take over just about any Mustang, to be honest. But, it's one of those things. The problem with the Barracudas, though, is they are very hard to find parts for, not mechanically, but body-wise, it's a nightmare, right? Nightmare. But, I mean, the 68 through, like 68 and 69 Barracudas are some of my favorites, to be honest. And what's interesting that people don't know, so the Barracuda, later on, and I believe this started in 68, maybe 67, The Barracuda became the base. The Cuda was the performance variant of it. So it's a little interesting. People don't realize that. But that's how it goes. So yeah. And actually, is this game over? Probably is. Seems to be. Yeah, I think it is. Oh no, it's not. Okay, they were just a commercial break. But anyhow, and I like them, but I also like my weird cars. Like, it's interesting because people ask me, like at times, what is your favorite Charger? You'd be surprised to learn my favorite Dodge Charger is not the 68, it's not a 69, it's not a 70, it's not a 71, definitely not a 72, 73, 74. And it's not any of the 80s ones, and it's not any of the late 70s Chargers either. It's actually, for me, and interchangeably because they didn't really change very much, 66 and 67 Chargers are my favorite. Just like something that where they actually got the inspiration for that design, because George just put in the chat there about AMCs, is the AMC Marlin. Because the Marlin came out in 1965, while the Charger debuted in 1966, and they stole some styling cues from the Marlin, but they made it a little better, because so the Charger is a hatchback, while the Marlin wasn't. It has this full fastback treatment, but it's got this just little opening truck. It's not as good of a design as the Charger was. It's kind of cool. And as for like, the AMX and the Javelin, those are some of my favorite cars. Oh yeah, go look up the Marlin. They're pretty neat, and they did have their SSTs, SST Marlins and stuff like that. You could get performance out of the Marlin. It was based on the Rambler, and the Rambler was their sort of basic economy sort of car, similar to like the Nova in that respect, but you could get them with a lot of performance, if you really wanted to. I don't know if you can get a 401 in a Marlin, but I know you can get like a I believe a 390 for sure, and they're just really neat. You don't see very many of them. I haven't seen one in a few years, to be honest. I've seen like 2 in my lifetime, so that's not just in pictures, like that's actually in person. Yeah, and I like those, and the Charger borrowed styling from that. Now, I'll fully admit a 66 to 67 Charger looks better than the Marlin does. I like the Marlin, but the Charger just did it a little better. That's fine, They kind of copied the styling and did it better. And, that's just kind of cool. And with like AMC, because, you had even the like I liked AMC styling. A lot of their styling. You can even go to the Hornet, which interestingly enough, even though they put so many different names on so many vehicles, after the Hornet debuted, and I think it was 71, either 70 or 71, I think it was 71. The Hornet became, so the Hornet was also the Concorde and the Eagle, and there's a few, to be honest. The Spirit as well. It even there's a few others, to be honest. I can't remember, but basically AMC through the 70s, excluding the Ambassador and the Matador, had their entire lineup with the same vehicle. It's kind of interesting, actually. Until they were bought out by Renault, and there were a few Renaults that were badged as AMCs and sold as AMCs. Like there was the AMC Reliance, which is a Renault Reliance. Terrible car. I've seen one in person. And it was at the Olds auction actually, which is going on right now. And there's gonna be a video on that, probably releasing maybe tomorrow. And then there's a video, I'm gonna upload it tonight. There's gonna be a video on basically the whole journey that I took to get that engine and transmission and why I did it on that big ass road trip that I did. Because I drove, just for that road trip alone, I drove close to 1,500 kilometers. Just insane. Worth it. I love driving down to Lethbridge, but man, it's a long ways. Because I was there and then back, and then plus, don't forget, I had to go up to Edmonton twice. So, owned either a Hornet or an Eagle. I don't remember which one. Really cool little car, but it was spec'd for Arizona. It had desert setting on the AC. Nice. And actually, so interestingly enough, easy way, because again, the Hornet was the start of all of those vehicles, like I mentioned. The Concorde, the Spirit, stuff like that. There's a few others too that I can't think off the top of my head, but there's a few others. So the Eagle, the easiest way to tell between an Eagle and a Hornet, the Eagles always sat higher because they were all-wheel drive or 4x4. The Hornet didn't start in the 60s. No, Hornet was a product of the 70s. I'll just look it up really quick right now. AMC Hornet. If I can spell Hornet, there we go. Let's see here. AMC Hornet. When did that start? Yeah, 1970 through 1977 for the Hornet. But it then, because the Gremlin is based off of it. Yeah, and the Eagle, the Spirit, and the Concorde. Right? And it's just pretty cool. But that's what kind of really, people say, what killed AMC? AMC killed AMC because they ran out of money and they just basically built the same vehicle forever. And that was their demise. Plus AMC vehicles, like, okay, see, there was a Eagle wagon as well. So, and the Hornet, I mean, because the Eagle debuted in, I think it was like 1980, so likely it was probably a Hornet wagon, which actually, interestingly enough, my grandparents had a Hornet wagon for a little while, but my grandfather sold it because it was so damn slow that, and this was when this happened, is when he sold it. So he was basically pinned going up this steep sort of hill, and a fully loaded logging truck passes them in the fast lane going up the steep grade of a hill. So then that's when he sold it, and I think that's when they got the Ford Ranch wagon. So it is pretty funny. And now, I because it was probably the 4-cylinder, to be honest. I don't actually, did they even come with the inline 6 in them? Let's see here. I'm just looking. Oh, there you go. 7 was the last year for Chevettes. Yeah, I didn't know that. Like, I knew it was mid 80s or even up to the late 80s, but I just didn't know what exact year for the Chevette. There you go. And the last year for the Eagle was actually 88 as well. And, it's just very interesting. Oh, that's really cool. See, I love the SX4 Eagles because that's the little two-door hatchback. And now the one thing is with the SX4 is because there was a base version of the SX4 that you could get the AMC 2.5, but that's not the one you wanted. You wanted the SX4 that had the little ducktail spoiler on the back, and it had Had a little wider arches on it and stuff like that. It was a really cool one, and it had the 4.2 inline six. And interestingly, and I believe it was only found in the Eagles, and I don't know for what years, to be honest. It's my memory is a little foggy on this, but because AMC could not keep up with the times and everybody introducing electronic fuel injection, they just could not afford to create their own fuel injection. So what they actually did was they modified, actually kind of genius, but it just didn't work very well. It was an electronically controlled carburetor. And I don't know what years it was offered, to be honest, but it was in the Eagle, that I do know. Because the Eagle was kind of their top model in the 80s. And it's just a little interesting. But again, it did not work very well because the computers that they had for it did not keep up, and most people just swapped them for plain Jane carburetor, to be honest. And what's interesting though about that AMC 258, aka the 4.2 liter, that actually Chrysler, once they bought AMC in 1988, they actually modified that engine to be the 4-liter high output that you saw in Jeeps. You know, that's that absolutely indestructible with multi-point fuel injection and everything car. Yeah, and see, and that's the one thing that people don't realize about AMCs. They stole parts from everyone. Um, and I have heard that actually, putting the 4-liter head on it, because I believe it's just a bolt-on too. And and you get your compression goes up, and so does your power, right? Doing that, and you get better efficiency out of it too, I'm sure. Even if you do it as a carbureted instead of injected, but I've also heard that people just put the 4 liters, like if they're looking for an engine for an Eagle, they'll put the 4 liters on them. Or any old AMC that happens to have that 258, they'll just put the 4-liter in them if they can't find a 258. And you get, again, the fuel injection and everything like that. You get way more power. Because those 4 liters produced actually quite a bit of power. It was quite surprising. So, I'm not sure exact power numbers, but I think it was close to 200 horsepower, to be honest. And I'm not sure torque-wise, but probably high 200s, I would guess. But still, it is surprising. And the fact, because I was just reading there, that so yours had the 258 in it. That's cool. I would love to own an AMC Eagle, especially the SX4, but I would take a wagon. And interestingly enough, they actually made a coupe as well as the wagon as well. So, and the sedan. That's what I meant to say. See, and it's interesting because, like, with AMC, they had little gimmicks like that. And they're just kind of cool. They're quirky. Through the 80s, they were a lot better than they were through the 70s and through the 60s. Because, like, the one thing is, AMC's, oddly enough, their engines were very, very good engines. No, I don't think I did, actually. Um, oh, no worries. Chat to you soon. Thanks for stopping by. Now I want to look at that. Oh, it's for some reason it unsubscribed me from your channel. That's why I didn't see it. Let's go to your community tab. There we go. Oh, yeah. Some of the comments on that are pretty funny. But, yeah, it's just kind of interesting with the AMCs. Because there was regular car reviews. I don't watch many of his videos, but I've watched a few. And something that he actually did, because he compared an AMC Gremlin. It was like a 1974, I think. Gremlin. He compared it to I think it was a 1970 or 71 Celica that he drove. And the Celica, he says, feels like a 90s car when it drives. It's amazing, to be honest. And like just Toyota quality was incredible, to be honest. But the old Gremlin felt like a 50s car driving down the road. And that's what he equated it to. So it's quite a bit interesting. Now the Eagles drive a little better than that, you know. And yeah, they probably tried to match closer to Toyota quality, because Toyota was like the benchmark, to be honest, for anybody. If they wanted the best quality, you just look at Toyota. Not only for reliability, although AMC had reliability in spades, they were fantastic for reliability. Their engines were always so good, especially the inline six. The inline six was their best, but even their V8s were quite incredible. The four cylinder gets a bad rap, but only because the four cylinder wasn't just put in AMC products, and because the 2.5 is honestly totally fine if you do not push it too hard and you do not tow with it. Here's the problem. They put that 2.5 AMC four cylinder into the Dodge Dakota. And I've only seen one Dakota with that engine in it. You don't see very many of them, to be honest. They're kind of rare. But it's just one of those things. And in the Dakota, it was terrible because the Dakota is, bigger, heavier. It was designed to, tow and whatever else, right? Because where, like Dodge, they did actually make a proper quarter-ton truck, because the Dakota was not a quarter-ton truck. It was sort of with the Dakota when it was debuted in 1988, 87 or 88. It was sort of in between classes. So it was between a 19, or sorry, what am I talking about? It was between a quarter ton and a half ton, somewhere in between there, for actual rating. But Dodge actually made two quarter ton pickup trucks, both of them in the 80s. Most people don't even know these exist. The first one, actually, they may have made them both at the same time, and I think they did. But the first one I'm going to talk about, though, happens to be one of my favorites. They're not a good vehicle, but they're one of my favorites, to be honest. Is you actually watch? I have to ask, why do you watch Scotty Kilmer? He spreads so much misinformation. He is a terrible mechanic. I've seen some of his stuff. Like, did you see that whole thing of him talking about that you shouldn't have he released a video, and it wasn't even on April Fool's Day. So there's that. Because if it was, then okay, fine. But he released this video on, when you're jumping a car, you shouldn't have the vehicle that you're jumping off of running. Because he said you could overcharge or overload the circuits, right? When it's just like, Scotty, you're a dumbass, because we have voltage regulators so that doesn't happen. Like, that was just the most asinine thing. And he said a few other things, to be honest, that are just like, what? I don't like him. I don't think he's funny. I'm not a fan of his content one bit. And again, he spreads misinformation, and I hate that he has such a big following and people actually follow him for the information he puts out. But it's not true. If he was just a satire channel, That'd be one thing, but it's not. And I just can't go for that. There's one thing, when I make a mistake on my channel, I address it and make sure that, and usually my stuff is very, very minor of what I do. It's nothing like that. Because, and actually it's interesting because if you try and jump a vehicle off, that's not running, or like, use that as, your base. The one thing is, if you don't have the hottest battery in the world in that car, you can actually kill the battery in the other car too. So it's he doesn't realize that, and it's so dumb because you do have to. If a battery's completely dead, you do have to have those jumper cables on it for a while. I've been there, done that. So yeah, it's just I'm not a fan of him. I never have. I tried watching a few of his videos, and it's just his style drives me insane. And all of these jump cuts that he does, it's like every few seconds, it's a jump cut, jump cut, jump cut, jump cut, jump cut, which it catches your eye, yeah, but it drives me bananas. Because not even like Mr. Beast, which I love Mr. Beast's channel, don't get me wrong, but he doesn't even do that, right? He will do jump cuts, but it's not every few seconds. So, yeah, it's just not a fan of his at all, and I just hate the fact that he has such a big following. Where people like me that are actually out here helping people properly have a meager following compared to that. But like, because I don't do the dumb stuff though either. Like, I could, just don't get me wrong, I could easily get my channel to much higher heights. To be honest, I know I could. Fun fact, actually, these live streams themselves are something that actually really does not help my channel, unfortunately, as I found out because I looked at some of my analytics for live streams. Fun fact, through live streams, I've actually lost about 44 subscribers all time. So it's a little interesting. Because I'd be close to 2,800 subscribers actually had I not lost those subscribers through live streams. Like, and I would love to have a bigger following and be able to do bigger projects and stuff like that and show people. Because I try and, like, even on my bigger stuff, I try and show as much detail as I can. But in the beginning, you show a ton of detail. Towards the end, you start showing less because you're just getting tired and you're not wanting to be filmed as much. And I've had that. You can look at the manual swap in my 81 Mustang. That I didn't show every single little detail. I showed the bulk of it though. Anything that you need to know. Well, because the one thing is, if I look at my actual, I'll go to YouTube Studio here. Here we go. Because YouTube Studio will show me. I'm at 2746, so I actually think I gained a subscriber today. So there you go. But I mean that short of that Fargo is actually doing pretty good. It's at 212 views so far and counting, in almost 6 hours. So it's pretty cool. And it's not even a full walk around of the truck. Like, it is a little bit. I show the front, I go to the side, I show the engine bay, and I stop at the badge because I only have a minute. I didn't even open the door because it's interesting. Something about trucks through the 40s and through the 50s, actually, there's only one door lock typically on those, and it's always on the passenger side. And it was a chivalrous thing. So, because what you were supposed to do is you walk your lady to the car, and it's just the sexist stuff at the time is kind of funny about this, but you walk your lady to the car, you open the door for her, you close it, then she's supposed to slide over and open the door from the inside. That was how you were supposed to do it. Now I don't believe we actually have the key for the door. So we might have to draw that out. Or I'm not even sure how you remove it. I'll have to find that out. It shouldn't be that hard, but I don't know. To be honest, I have no idea. I've never really dealt with a 50s truck ever. And it's not even 50. This is a 40s. They ran this design from 48 till 52. 52 or 53. I think it's 53. But, and it's one of these things. And it's interesting. All of these 48 through 52, 53. Again, I'd have to look it up again, but I believe it's 52. They all had the 218 cubic inch flathead 6. And depending on which one you had, so there is the F1B, which is the half-ton truck, and then there's the F1C, which is a 3/4 ton and 1 ton. The half tons only have, I think it's 92 horsepower, while the 3/4 tons and 1 tons actually have, which is the F1C designation, have 108 horsepower. Oh, ow. I hate asthma sometimes. Oh, that was terrible. But there we go. So, yeah, it's just something just with my research today that I was looking into and saw that. It's just a little interesting. Oh, and Vegas just scored again. So now it's 4-2 in that game. I happen to be watching the Vegas Winnipeg game too in the background. Because yeah, I mean, and it's the playoffs, so there we go. Yeah, I coughed so hard that my eyes started to tear up. Oh. There we go. I'll be good. But yeah, so the extra about 16 horsepower made a big difference in those trucks. I don't know torque numbers, how much different they are. Oh, and this is actually my buddy Mike texting me. Friend is hopefully tomorrow. There we go. Yeah, so sorry about that. Just he's calling me now. I'm in the middle of a live stream. Damn it. Because he's calling me, I'm gonna have to let this end. So yeah. Love you all. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.